Hello and welcome to the next lesson in this Windows Deployment Services training course for Windows Server 2012 and Windows Server 2012 R2. So far in this training series, I have shown you how to install and configure Windows Deployment Services on a Windows Server 2012 and Windows Server 2012 R2 server. In the last lesson, using my Windows 8.1 Pro DVD, I demonstrated how to add a boot image and an install image to the image store on the WDS server. Now that we have added our images, in this lesson and the next lesson, I will demonstrate how these images can be deployed to client computers over the network. In order for a client computer to download and install an image, the client computer must contain a network interface card which is PXE compatible. PXE, or Pre-Boot Execution Environment, is a technology built into most modern network adapters. PXE allows a client computer without an operating system to obtain an IP address from a DHCP server, join the network, and then download and install a Windows operating system from the WDS server. This is all very well, but it does beg the question, how do you keep your images secure? For instance, how do you stop a user on the network from bringing in a bare metal computer from home, connecting it to the network, and potentially downloading one of your operating system images? With Windows Deployment Services, you are able to control which computers on the network are able to connect to the WDS server and download images. This is achieved by configuring the PXE response settings. It is far easier to explain the PXE response settings if I actually show them to you. So I will now change to my Windows Server 2012 R2 server with Windows Deployment Services installed so that I can show you the available PXE options. First, open Server Manager from the lower left corner and select Tools from the top right corner. From the drop-down list, select Windows Deployment Services. This will open the Windows Deployment Services console. From the left pane, expand the Servers option. This will display my WDS server, wds1.techtipsfromwill.co.uk. Right-click on the WDS server and select Properties from the drop-down list. This will open the Properties screen for the WDS server. At the top, select the PXE Response tab. From this screen, notice we have a few options. The option you select from this tab will determine how images are deployed to client computers. The first option is Do Not Respond to Any Client Computers. If you select this option, no images will be deployed to client computers on the network whatsoever. You can think of this setting as effectively turning Windows Deployment Services off. This is a good option to select if you aren't planning to deploy any images for a significant period of time and want to ensure that your images are secure and cannot be downloaded. The second option is Respond only to known client computers. This is the most secure option and is suitable for tightly managed environments. If you select this option, the WDS server will only deploy an image to a client computer if it has been pre-staged first. Don't worry, I will cover pre-staging in a lot more detail later on in this lesson. The third option is Respond to all client computers known and unknown. If you select this option, all PXE-compatible client computers will be able to connect to the WDS server and download an image. By selecting this option, you are essentially saying that you do not wish to prevent any client computers from connecting to the WDS server and installing an image. By itself, this option provides the least amount of security for your images. For this reason, you may wish to enable the Require Administrator Approval for Unknown Computers option. When this checkbox is ticked, pre-staged client computers are able to download an image. However, client computers which have not been pre-staged will require an administrator to intervene and grant permission for the image to be installed. The Pixie Response option you choose will ultimately depend on how security conscious you are with your images. In this lesson, I will demonstrate how to deploy images when the Respond Only to Known Client Computers option is selected. When this option is selected, you can only deploy an image to a computer if it has been pre-staged. If the computer has not been pre-staged, the image will not be installed. Before I show you how to pre-stage a client computer, what exactly is pre-staging? Pre-staging is essentially a form of security. Pre-staging helps to prevent rogue computers from connecting to your network and downloading images from the WDS server maliciously. When you pre-stage a client computer, you are essentially saying that that particular computer is trusted and is allowed to download an image. This is why pre-staged computers are commonly referred to as known computers. If you are using Windows deployment services in an Active Directory infrastructure, pre-staging a client will also create a computer account for the client in Active Directory. By doing this, the WDS server is made aware of the pre-staged computer's existence. When a pre-staged computer connects to the network, it will contact the WDS server and will be allowed to download an image. This begs the question, how exactly do you pre-stage a client computer? In order to pre-stage a client computer, you have to be able to uniquely identify it. This can be done by using either the MAC address of the client computer or the GUID of the client computer. Let me explain what each of these are. The MAC address, or Media Access Control address, is used to uniquely identify every network adapter manufactured in the world. When a hardware vendor produces a new network adapter, they will assign it a MAC address. Every network adapter manufactured worldwide has its own MAC address. In other words, no two network adapters in the world will share the same MAC address. The MAC address itself is an alphanumeric hexadecimal number. The first half of the MAC address identifies the manufacturer of the network adapter, whereas the second half uniquely identifies the adapter itself. The MAC address assigned to a particular network adapter cannot be changed and is actually burned into the firmware of the device. When you pre-stage a client computer using the MAC address, you are essentially saying only allow the computer that has this MAC address to download an image. If a client computer with a different MAC address tries to connect, the WDS server will not allow an image to be downloaded. Alternatively, you could also pre-stage a client computer using the client's GUID. A GUID, or Globally Unique Identifier, is another method of uniquely identifying the client computer. In the real world, GUIDs are used to uniquely identify a number of things, including software applications, files, and databases. GUIDs can also be used to uniquely identify network adapters. Every network adapter manufactured has a unique GUID associated with it. A GUID is usually represented as a 32-digit alphanumeric number, which is divided up into 5 chunks. The first chunk is 8 digits in length. The second, third, and fourth chunks are 4 digits in length, and the fifth chunk is 12 digits in length. When you pre-stage a client computer using the GUID, you are essentially saying only allow the computer that has this GUID to download an image. If a client computer with a different GUID tries to connect, the WDS server will not allow an image to be downloaded. Now that we know what MAC addresses and GUIDs are, the next question we need to answer is how do we find the MAC address and the GUID? This information is relatively easy to find out within Windows. However, with Windows Deployment Services, it is highly likely that the client computers you will be working with will be bare metal computers that do not have an operating system installed. So how do we find a client's MAC address and GUID without using Windows? All you have to do is plug an Ethernet cable into the network adapter of the client computer and connect the client to the network. When you power the client computer on, whilst the client is performing its initial boot checks, simply press the F12 key. Pressing F12 whilst the computer boots will force the computer to attempt a PXE boot from the network adapter. Of course, this will only work if the client computer is compatible with PXE. Alternatively, you could also go into the BIOS of the client computer and modify the boot order so that the network adapter is the first bootable device. Assuming the network adapter is PXE compatible, the MAC address and GUID of the network adapter will appear on screen. When this information first appears, it will only remain on screen for a few seconds, which may not be long enough for you to take note of the details. One trick that I like to use is to press the pause button on the keyboard when this information first appears. This will freeze the screen and will allow you plenty of time to take a note of the MAC address and the GUID. Now that we know how to obtain the MAC address and GUID of the client computer, I will now change back to my Windows Server 2012 R2 server to demonstrate how to pre-stage the client. In the Windows Deployment Services console, in the left-hand pane, notice at the bottom we have the option Active Directory Pre-Stage Devices. To pre-stage a client computer, right-click on the Active Directory Pre-Stage Devices container and select Add Device from the drop-down list. This will open the Add Pre-Stage Device wizard. The first screen you will see is the Identity page. The information you enter on this page is used to uniquely identify the client computer. In the Name field, you need to choose a name for the client computer. The name you enter here will become the name of the computer account which will be created in Active Directory. For now, I will enter a name of Computer 1. In the Device ID field, you are required to enter either the MAC address or the GUID for the client computer. It really does not matter which one you use, it is simply a matter of preference. Personally, I like to use the MAC address, so I will enter the MAC address of the network adapter installed in the client computer I would like to pre-stage. In the Device Group field, we have the option of adding a group name. This is simply a label which appears on the pre-staged computer to help you identify it. This is particularly useful if you are planning to create a lot of pre-staged devices. For now, I will enter a device group of workstations. In the OU field, you are able to choose where the computer account for the client will be stored in Active Directory. If you leave the OU field blank, the computer account will be created in the default Computers container in Active Directory. If, however, you would like the client computer to be stored in an alternative location, you need to specify the name of the organizational unit using an LDAP syntax. To demonstrate this, I have created an organizational unit on my Active Directory domain controller called Clients. For ease of administration, I would like the computer accounts for all client computers on my network to be stored in the Clients organizational unit. To add the computer account to the Clients organizational unit, I will enter the LDAP syntax OU equals clients, comma, DC equals tech tips from Will, comma, DC equals co, comma, DC equals UK. This syntax is essentially saying, place the computer account in the client's organizational unit, which resides in the techtipsfromwill.co.uk domain. When you have finished, click the Next button. The next screen is the boot page. The settings on this page will determine which boot image the client will use. In the referral server field, you first need to choose which WDS server you would like the client to contact to download the boot image from. From here, I will enter the full host name of this WDS server, wds1.techtipsfromwill.co.uk. The next setting I would like to discuss is the boot image field. In this field, you need to select the boot image that the client's computer will download. If you recall from our last lesson, a boot image is essentially the Windows PE environment that allows you to make all of the initial configurations, such as choosing a language and a keyboard layout, before you install Windows. If you watched our last lesson, you will remember that I have already added a boot image from my Windows 8.1 Pro DVD. To choose a boot image, click the Select button. This will open the Select Default Boot Image dialog box. Here, you will see listed all of the boot images that have been added to the WDS server. In my case, I will select the Windows 8.1 Pro x64 boot image that I added in the last lesson. Once you have selected the boot image you'd like to use, click the OK button. The chosen boot image will appear in the boot image field. Once you have selected the boot image you'd like to use, the last setting is the Pixie prompt policy. This option allows you to decide what kind of interaction is required, if any, from the user. For instance, the require the user to press the F12 key to continue the Pixie boot option will require the user to press the F12 key before the client downloads the boot image. The always continue the Pixie boot option will cause the client to automatically download the boot image and will require no user interaction whatsoever. The continue the Pixie boot unless the user presses the escape key option will download the boot image automatically unless the user opts out by pressing the escape key. For now, I will select the require the user to press the F12 key to continue the Pixie boot option. When you have finished, click the Next button. The next screen is the Client Unattend page. This screen is only required if you would like to perform an unattended installation of the image. An unattended installation allows you to create a special type of file called an answer file. The answer file will essentially answer all of the Windows installation prompts for you, so that you do not have to visit each client computer and answer the install prompts manually. Don't worry, I will cover unattended installations and answer files in much more detail in later lessons. To keep things simple for now, I will simply click the Next button. The next screen is the Join Rights page. From here, you need to nominate a domain user account that will be used to connect the client computer to the domain. To nominate a user account, click the Configure User button. This will open the Configure User dialog box. From here, you need to select the user account you'd like to use. To keep things simple, I will select my domain administrator account with full rights. When finished, click the Finish button. When the wizard completes, you will receive a prompt stating that the pre-staged device was added successfully. If I accept the prompt, notice that the Computer 1 client has appeared in the list of Active Directory pre-staged devices. Now that we have finished pre-staging the client computer, we are now ready to deploy an image to it. I will now change over to my pre-staged client computer to demonstrate how to install an image from the WDS server. When the bare metal client is first switched on, it will perform a PXE boot. During the PXE boot, the client computer will contact the DHCP server on the network and will receive an IP address. After obtaining an IP address, the client computer is able to contact my WDS server, wds1.techtipsfromwill.co.uk. As per the PXE prompt policy option I chose earlier, notice that I am now being prompted to press the F12 key to continue loading the boot image. When I press the F12 key, the client will start to download the boot image I specified earlier in the pre-staging wizard. It can take a couple of minutes for the boot image to completely download. When the download completes, you will have a working copy of Windows PE. Whilst in Windows PE, the options you can configure are exactly the same as if you had booted directly from the Windows DVD. In my case, I will first confirm that the location and keyboard options are set to United Kingdom, and will then click the Next button. Notice, at this point, I will be asked to enter network credentials. Here, I will enter my domain administrator account which I nominated earlier. After entering my credentials, I will be asked to choose which Windows operating system I would like to download from the WDS server. If you recall from the last lesson, I added 2 install images to the WDS server, the first being Windows 8.1 and the second being Windows 8.1 Pro. As I would like to add this client to my Active Directory domain, I will select to install the Windows 8.1 Pro image and will then click the Next button. Next, I will be asked to partition the hard disk of the client computer and decide where I would like to install the operating system. Notice that I am still able to access the drive options and partition the hard disk in exactly the same way as if installing directly from the Windows DVD. To keep things simple, I will select to use the entire hard disk and will just click the Next button. The client computer will now start to download the Windows 8.1 Pro operating system from the WDS server and will install it over the network. When the installation completes, you will have a perfect installation of Windows 8.1 Pro on this client computer. This concludes how to deploy an image to a pre-staged client computer. I hope that you have enjoyed this lesson and found it useful. In the next lesson, I will demonstrate how to deploy an image to a client computer that has not been pre-staged. If you'd like to see more Windows Server 2012 and Windows Server 2012 R2 training videos, please feel free to browse our YouTube channel. And don't forget to show your support by liking our videos and leaving your comments. Many thanks, and we'll see you on the next lesson.